Ladies and gentlemen, we are finally here with player ratings. We're going to be going from the lowest ranked team to the highest. And of course, that gives us the first team that we are introducing, the Baltimore Blue Crabs. Now, it was a rough go for the Blue Crabs last year. They went 3-13. All three of their wins came against Washington, who was the first round exit in the North Division. They really struggled against the better teams they faced. That's why they ended up with a player team comparison of the Bears. I think it's a pretty fair comparison, especially because the Bears, as well as the Blue Crabs, have a lot of these positions figured out. They just are struggling to really put the talent together and win games. Now I'm going to go over to the left side of the screen here. I gave them a B+ at quarterback. I do think Daniel Calkins is up there with the best quarterbacks in the league. Definitely one of the most capable. Would probably like to see him run a little bit more because that was kind of like the meta offense last year with the running quarterbacks. I do think coming into 4-on-4 that will be a little bit more weak. However, he just really didn't have any receivers to catch the ball. Moving down the list here, I gave them a C at running back. They didn't really run the ball at all, so it's kind of hard to say really what they are like at that running back position. I do think that Brendan Mayer could be a substantial part of their run game next year if they utilize him correctly. I would have liked to see them run the ball with him a lot more. I really think he could be effective there. I gave them a C- at wide receiver because obviously so many drop passes. It's ridiculous how many passes these guys dropped. They didn't really have a tight end, so I gave them a C+ just because they do have some size on offense, which a lot of teams kind of lack. Their defense was probably the strong suit of this team, if you can even say that. They were really, really bad at stopping the run, so I gave them a C+ at D-line and linebacker. And then their secondary came up with some stops occasionally, but B- is pretty much average. That's what I ended up giving them at corner and safety. Now for the ratings, worst offense in the league, I gave them a 77. That's obviously as low as I went with any team. A little bit higher defensively. I gave them an 82. I think that's pretty fair. They were stopping these high-end offenses they were facing every now and then in Montreal and Scranton, and they faced Georgia as well in Week 4. Honestly, a pretty tough schedule for them. I think that they will definitely play better next season. Coaching, I went with an 80. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. They have an interesting coaching situation, and I went with a 78 overall just because the reason I didn't go lower is because I think that there's not that big of a skill gap in our league. Let's talk a little bit more about coaching, managing, whatever you want to call it. Zane Ovitt was their general manager this past season. And there was definitely some upside there. He's definitely a businessman. I'll give him that. Tried to make a couple trades with him. He was pretty stingy, if I do say so myself. I think when it comes to management, he's probably right around average. And my main gripe with him is Zane Ovitt more concerned about putting people in the seats? We know that Baltimore has a huge fan base. They definitely draw the most people to in-person games. Is he more concerned about profiting off of these ticket prices than he is about winning games? I'd like to say so. I mean, the play calling wasn't really there. I don't think he ever called a play for this team. I question the dedication. I really think that the Blue Crabs could benefit from having a play caller there. They kind of just ran slants every single time and then they dropped the ball. I think they could definitely get more creative, and that would be very helpful. However, I do think that they could win games with Ovitt if he becomes a little less worried about the financials that come with owning a team. And of course, I went with the Jim Harbaugh player comparison, coach comparison, whatever you want to call it. We do know that Harbaugh at Michigan was doing some sketchy things, and I think that could be said with Ovitt as well, with his concern about just kind of profiting off the team. And now let's move on here. So here we've got Daniel Calkins, I think pretty easily the heart and soul of this team. I gave him the Dak Prescott comparison on offense. Not really much of a scrambler, but can do it if needed. I think that he's very underrated, as I think Dak Prescott is. Gets a lot of unnecessary hate when I think that they are both top-tier quarterbacks in their respective leagues. Now, Calkins, he's got a strong arm, really accurate, just Really would like to see him run more. I think he's capable, but I went with that 82 rating just because we didn't really see him do it. Definitely had really high yards per carry because when he was taking off, it was pretty much a touchdown. 88 overall, I think that's pretty fair considering we didn't see a lot of production out of him. A lot of interceptions, not a lot of them were his fault. And on defense, I think that he is also a top-tier cornerback. I went very conservative with his ratings compared to what I think his talent actually is. Just really tight coverage out of him, really good technique, and I think that he could do a lot for this team next year, especially if he's surrounded with more talent. Now, next up, we have Evan Snow. This is really the other talented counterpart of the Baltimore Blue Crabs, and he didn't play very much, but when he was out there, he was pretty good. I mean, just really athletic. You can see that he has an athletic background. If I had to guess, I'd probably say lacrosse, but I mean, he played a little bit of quarterback, did pretty well, but I think that he definitely shined as a receiver and a safety. Now, safety in BFL is someone that I consider to be versatile enough to jump out in zone coverage if needed, contain the quarterback, can also play man coverage. That's kind of my definition of a safety. I mean, just pretty crisp routes. He didn't drop any balls out there. He's fast, and on defense, his coverage was solid. So, I mean, I think that he could play a big role in this Blue Crabs team, but the league's going to be 4-on-4 next season. 2 people are not going to cut it if this team wants to win games. Gave him the player comparison of Garrett Wilson. I feel like that's pretty fair considering that Garrett Wilson is young. He's pretty proven, but he hasn't shown that he's a top wide receiver. I mean, and he's just pretty well-rounded. And then on defense, I went with Micah Hyde, a pretty well-rounded safety. And I think that those are pretty fair comparisons here. And now we have Brendan Mayer, someone that I have pretty high praise for, actually. I mean, he was really good on defense for the Blue Crabs. Blazing speed, pretty good coverage, and he made a lot of tackles for them. I think that J.C. Horn is a really good comparison, kind of like a pretty good corner on a not-so-good team. Definitely still developing, has potential to be a top corner in the league. Offensively, it was pretty bad. I think that, honestly, considering the production, an 80 overall is pretty generous, but the route running is really good out of him. The speed's really good. Where he is lacking is the catching, man. I mean, I hate to say this, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He dropped easily the most balls in the league. It was pretty ugly out there at times. That's why I went with the Kadarius Toney comparison. When he has the ball, he can do a lot of good things, but it's just a little bit difficult to get it to him. And I think that he could be a big part of this offense if they change the way that they're utilizing him, as can be said for Kadarius Toney. It's just, I really would like to see him play well, but it didn't happen this season. Now, next up, we have Tyler Harsh. Small sample size. I'm going to make these next few pretty quick just because of the sample size being so small. They only played half a season, but I went with Devontae Parker as his offensive player comparison. You know, like a big body wide receiver that you can just kind of depend on to make the plays. He's not going to be like an insane playmaker for you, but you can look to him and he'll probably catch the ball. He gets a decent amount of separation. Didn't play a lot of offense this year, but I felt that was a pretty fair comparison. And then defensively is where he really showed out. Really good tackler in limited time. Pass coverage was decent. I think that he could definitely play for this team and be a solid corner. Next up, we have Sean Ramirez. Just another instance of just a small sample size. He's very fast, runs track as far as I know. Pass coverage is a little bit less tight than Tyler Harsh, but pretty good overall. He played a little bit of offense. The route running wasn't really there, but speed definitely is, which is why I gave him a Rashid Shaheed comparison, kind of like a gadget player that could definitely do some good things for you if you use him correctly. And I went with Caleb Farley on offense just because still developing, but very athletic, very fast. Next up, we have Sean McKee, who was really there for the Blue Crabs in some dark times. Didn't play a lot as the season went on, but man, he was the only person on the team that could catch the ball for a minute there. I think the first 8 games, but the route running isn't really there, but man, you can depend on him to catch the ball. That's kind of why I went with Hunter Renfrow. If he gets even a little bit of separation, you can target him and you can just depend on him to make the play. He's not really going to go and make these like flashy long plays, but Put him on an in route, you can hit him and he'll make the catch and you'll get a good 15 yards. Now, next up here, we have Tyler Capiello. He's going to wrap it up simply because I think that he kind of is really telling of what Baltimore was as a team this year. Was injured, I think, 3 out of the 4 series, didn't play a lot. That's why I went with Tim Patrick on offense. Really struggled with injuries these past few years, but Tim Patrick used to be touted as a pretty good wide receiver. And I went with Trey Waynes on defense for the same reason. Just haven't really seen a lot out of him. That's the only reason that his ratings are so low. And I gave him these player comparisons of players that really dealt with injuries a lot in their career. That was the coverage of the first of our 8 teams, the Baltimore Blue Crabs. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for coverage of the other 7 teams, and thank you for listening.